All right, it's time to get down to basics. When I say basics, I mean
Basics.
what is sound? What do you think? What is sound? Well, we know we use our ears to hear, but what is sound really? Sound travels through the air, and what we hear as sound is actually waves of air pressure that come from some sort of source, and they hit our eardrum, and then our brain turns that into some electrical impulses, and somehow those electrical impulses become what we hear as sound. Don't ask me how that last part works. I have no idea. I don't think anybody has any idea. It's pure magic. But what's important to know is that sound is waves of air pressure. So another way of stating that is vibration. Now, I have here sort of oscilloscope, which means something that can look at sound waves. So I'm going to play my synthesizer. And you can see a representation of what we're hearing. Pretty cool looking. So what we're seeing on this display is a two-dimensional representation of what are actually three-dimensional sound waves, but they're easiest to visualize like this. And there's a few important things to know about it. First is what makes pitch. Now, pitch means how high or low. This is high pitch, low pitch. So what determines pitch in terms of sound waves is the distance between the peaks of the waves. That is, how short or long the wavelength of each individual wave is. If I play a really high note, look at how close together all the little waves are. As I go lower, they become wider, wider, really wide, really wide. So, how long each individual wave is determines how high or low it sounds. That's called frequency. So frequency and pitch are the same thing. Frequency is what gives our brain information about pitch. Now, the other thing we need to know about is what they call loudness. That's how loud something is, or the volume of something. So if we look on the display, you can see that as the note gets quieter, the waves get smaller, vertically smaller. How tall the wave is on this display is how loud it is. So large waves, in terms of their amplitude, it's called, are louder. And as it dies off, it gets quieter like that, and the wave gets smaller. Now in the air, it doesn't look quite like this. In the air, it works that when things are loud, there are more air molecules pushed closer together. They're denser. There's more energy in one area. That makes something louder. When we look at it on an oscilloscope like this, we see it as being taller. So the height of the wave looks like how loud it is. And as you remember from working with your loops, when we're looking at the waveforms inside of Studio One, when the waveforms are very tall, that means they're loud. So it's the same thing we're seeing here. So again, frequency is pitch. That's how fast the wave moves, or how fast it looks to us to move. It's actually the distance between the waves. So the wavelength. So high pitch, small. Wavelength, low pitch, large. And the height is the amplitude, which is how loud we perceive it. So those are the two main qualities we need to know about. Now, where does vibration or sound waves come from? Well, basically everything. Anything that disturbs the air is going to cause sound waves. So if I clap my hands, if I speak, if I play a guitar or a piano, anything that we do disturbs the air and makes little waves. And then those waves hit our eardrum, and that's what we perceive as sound. So anything that disturbs the air is going to cause a sound. Now, we can also create these sound waves artificially, digitally, like I'm doing right now, where the synthesizer inside of Studio One is creating these waves and sending them out my speakers, or out your headphones in this case, and then those are hitting our ear. the headphones are now disturbing the air, and then those sound waves hit your eardrum and become the sound you perceive. So there's a lot of ways to create these sound waves, both in the real world and artificially, but in the end, they always have to end up as air pressure waves that hit our eardrum. That's how we hear sound, unless you're doing some advanced scientific work where you can artificially stimulate your nerves in your brain, but we're not talking about that right now. Now, the other thing to know about is noise. So if we check this out, listen to this. This is what people call white noise. See how complicated the waveform looks on here? Check out the difference. Smooth and constant, right? It's a constant speed of a wave. Constant wavelength. That's what creates a smooth pitch, a constant pitch that we can tell is a note, versus the noise just sounds like nothing. That doesn't mean it's bad, it's just different. Music is made of a combination of noise and pitches. So instruments like the piano and the guitar and synthesizers create pitches, and instruments like drums create noise in various ways. Sometimes they have some pitch, sometimes they don't. Cymbals are a different kind of noise. A snare drum has a lot of noise on it. All the drums have some kind of noise aspect and some kind of pitch aspect, and even the instruments have some kind of noise aspect associated with them. So one is not better than the other. They work in tandem to create what we consider pleasing music. But when we hear it in its raw form like this, pure white noise can be pretty harsh. All that's important to understand about it right now is that a pitch requires a constant speed, a constant wavelength to make a clear and discernible pitch, whereas noise is random. And that's why it has no pitch, it just sounds like madness. So these are the building blocks of music in the most fundamental sense. So just to cover that once again, when we hear something, that is pressure waves of air hitting our eardrums, they get converted into electrical impulses that somehow get turned into what we call sound. The distance between the tops of the waves, that's their wavelength, and how short or long that is, or how fast it appears to us, that is the pitch, the frequency. So high pitch, low pitch, and how tall they are, that's the amplitude, that is their volume, that's their loudness. So as it dies off, it gets smaller, it gets quieter. So things that disturb the air in a big way are loud, like airplanes, for instance, and things that disturb the air in just a very small way, like rubbing your fingers together, are quiet. You can hardly hear them. And the other thing is that noise is when you don't have a constant speed of vibration. It's random, and it sounds like craziness. Music is made of a combination of the two. It's quite amazing, actually. And then when we start getting into composing more music, we find skillful ways to blend these two aspects into pleasing songs. So that does it for the introduction to vibration and sound. So we'll start getting into some more music theory in the next video.